Hi Shailaja, good to see you.
Hi, Pramada. Lovely to see you too. Really looking forward to this
Great,
conversation.
lovely. So we already have some guests who joined us. So I think without further ado, we can begin. Let me briefly introduce you, and then we'll dive into the book and all the topics you plan to discuss. Right?
Sure.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, friends. Today is International Yoga Day, and we are delighted to have with us our author Shailaja Menon, author of the book Yoga Shakti. Shailaja is a certified Manasa yoga teacher, speaker, and freelance writer-editor based in Malaysia. She has over 18 years of experience in yoga, both as a teacher and a practitioner, and teaches at her studio, Mat and Beyond Yoga Studio in Malaysia. So we're delighted to have her with us to enlighten us further on yoga and various aspects related to it. So very warm welcome to you, Shailaja. And to begin, in your book, you mentioned that you explore not only the physical benefits of yoga, but also the spiritual and mental fulfillment one gains from this practice. So could you explain the holistic benefits of yoga for our viewers?
Yeah, sure. So it's always my we only think about shapes but the actual essence of yoga practice is all about the mind. For that, we go back to one of the most ancient scriptures and most revered scriptures among yoga practitioners called the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, written by Maharishi Patanjali. And there, if you see, it's just pure mind science. Yeah, so they say it is one of the earliest and most detailed exploration of the human psyche and consciousness. So it's about 196 aphorisms on the mind and consciousness. And in that, if you see, only 3 sutras are about the body. Yeah, so the rest of it completely explores the mind. So it is absolutely mind science. And right in the very beginning of the sutras, in the very second verse of the Yoga Sutras and the third verse of the Yoga Sutras, it talks about the mind and spirituality. So in the second verse, he goes on to say the reason we practice yoga. Yeah, he says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So that is to still the waves of the mind. And then what happens, right? What happens with that? So the third sutra goes on to say, Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. So we get established in our true self, which is what spirituality is about, right? It is about coming home to our true self. So the usual example that I use about is to explain this concept is about the ocean and the waves. Yeah, so our emotions are so choppy, right? Most of us, I am sure, are really tormented by troubled emotions, right? Choppy emotions going up and down. Like I tell people, even 24 hours, if you take, we have these highs, we have these lows, and we're constantly tossed between these, what they call the dualities of life. Right? So as a result of which our minds look very much like a choppy ocean with these waves rising up all the time. So, and what happens is that we tend to get identified with it, right? So we say, I'm an angry person or I'm a depressed person. And, we tend to think of ourselves as those kind of people. But
Right.
as the waves of the mind, right? We're going into this later about mind, body, and breath. But through the practice, our minds get settled. Those waves settle. And then it's like when you look into a clear, settled waters of a lake, you see your reflection clearly, right? Because otherwise, you only see the choppy. You only see the anger, you only see the dissatisfaction, you only see the panic, you only see the anxiety, and we think we are that. But as the waves of the mind settle, like how the waves of the stormy ocean settle, when we look at ourselves, we get to see our true nature, which is, what we're all trying to connect with through these practices. So I hope I've explained that.
No, I think that's a very good teaser and a beginning to sort of help us get into this. And I understand there are different branches of yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, to name a few. So could you tell us more about the different branches of yoga that you've explored in your book and their unique characteristics?
Yeah, so I think Indian spirituality, our sages and rishis were so broad-minded and open-minded. I think that is one takeaway from here, where it was never like one size fits all. And it was never that there is only, one path. So they understood the nature of the human mind, which is so vast and which is so different and so they are so aligned in many different ways. We all have inclinations which are different, so all of these different parts are to suit people with different inclinations. So Raja Yoga talks about how to get to samadhi, and according to Swami Vivekananda, he gives the Yoga Sutras. So he says the path prescribed in the Yoga Sutras is the path to samadhi, and he calls that Raja Yoga. And then also in a book called, another very revered scripture called the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, so they talk about how Hatha Yoga is actually a path to achieve Raja Yoga. What is the Raja Yoga concept? And now when we think about Jnana Yoga, it is about wisdom, right? Jnana stands for wisdom. So it is studying of the scriptures, contemplating on those scriptures, and eventually trying to live the wisdom of the scriptures. But then there are also people, so that is considered like, people who are intellectualists and who like to study and, dissect everything that they read about. And then there is the Bhakti Yoga part. Again, Bhakti stands for devotion. And this is also according to nature of human beings. So a lot of people are just naturally more connected to their emotions. So this is very suited for people who, love the rituals of prayer and, all of that associated with bhakti, going to the temples. But it's not only that, it is also the realization of a presence. Yeah, so they attribute everything to a higher presence. So they see a God or that universal principle in everything that they do and in everything that happens in their life. So nothing is about them. Everything is shaped by bhakti, right? They understand everything that happens in their lives as the shaping of bhakti. So it's also that it's not just rituals and bhajans and all that, but it's also that, the constant feeling in your heart that, everything is attributed to that higher principle. And then we have karma yoga, where again karma is usually understood as action, but in the style that I teach, Manasa Yoga, my teacher says it's also movement, right? So we are constantly, actually our eyes are constantly seeing, our ears are constantly hearing, our, everything, our tongue is constantly trying to, taste stuff. So so much is happening, this constant movement that is going on. And then if we actually explore it, we realize that we are not doing anything, that actually everything is being done by us. So we understand that whatever we do is not, we release that feeling of doership. Yeah, so everything that we do as an, like a service, in service of that higher principle as karma. And then there is also the path that we follow, which is Hatha Yoga, and which is about connecting to energy and really being able to be absorbed in energy through all of these different practices, which is asana practice, pranayama, bandhas, mudras, kriyas, all of that comprise under the Hatha Yoga principle. So these are all the different, I'm sure there are other ways as well, but these are the most common paths that, and if you see, it really is inclined towards people's nature, what they choose. So our rishis understood that people were inclined in different ways and people had different natures, and they made allowances for that. So it was never about, everybody has to do this one thing.
Thank you for explaining that so clearly. And just before this, you mentioned Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and Maharishi Patanjali lays down Ashtanga Yoga, or the 8 limbs of yoga.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate on this as well?
Yeah, so this is actually one of the most standout parts. If you talk about the Yoga Sutras, the Ashtanga Yoga is what everybody will connect with, and even the most basic yoga practitioners will be very aligned, will be aware of these principles. So he lays down to me like Yoga Sutras, it gives you from even the Ashtanga Yoga From stress relief to samadhi, everything is there in the Ashtanga Yoga. So it's a holistic approach that incorporates all the different limbs of yoga. So Ashta is 8 and Anga is limbs. Yeah, so they comprise of, I'll go into each of them later, but I just give you the overview. So they have yamas and niyamas, and then they have asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So these are the Ashtavangami. Now, Patanjali himself says in the, like before he lists out this in the Sutras 2.28, he says that the reason that these Ashtanga, what is the benefit of this? Yeah, so he says the reason that we practice this Ashtanga Yoga is to release or to reduce the impurities. Yeah, so we are all filled with impurities and toxicity. So we need to find a way to get past that, and practicing of this regularly will help us get there. So yamas and niyamas are like the foundational concepts. So they are something like do's and don'ts. Right, so the first yamas will be about this ahimsa, satya, asteya. So these are the things that when we behave with or when we deal with people, society. Right, ahimsa is non-violence, satya is truthful, ahimsa, satya, asteya is non-stealing. So all of these principles, it's like a code of conduct, right? It tells us how to behave. And then when you come to niyamas, it's more like a disciplines that we observe. It's very personal. So it's tapaswadhyaya, ishvara pranidhana, saucha, santosha. So these are all things that we have to adhere to. Like tapas talks about, like strong effort that we have to put in. Swadhyaya is like self-study and this constant reflection on our own selves, our actions, our thoughts, our intentions, right? It's constantly a 24/7 kind of activity. And, Ishvara Pranidhana is another very beautiful concept where even Maharishi Patanjali says, yeah, you can put in tapas, you can do swadhyaya, but eventually you have to give it up to that higher principle and you have to accept, whatever happens. And, that is that concept of surrender. So we surrender all the efforts to that higher principle. So these are the ways that we internally have to work, right? These are the attitudes to cultivate. These are the ways in which we interact with the world. So it lays down all those, precepts. And then we go to asana, which is the third one. And everybody must be familiar with, they say, a lot of the purists will complain that that is the most popular part of, the Ashtanga. And in fact, they say yoga has come down to asana. So it's hugely popular because it involves the body and movement. But it's not just body and movement. You can actually integrate all of it into asana. And then there's pranayama, which is breathing practices, which also has become hugely popular, especially with the COVID. I think a lot of emphasis on breathing, lung, respiratory system, all of that. And then they have actually divided this Ashtanga Yoga into Baharanga and Antaranga. So the external, so these four, and somehow they have a little bit of conflict about whether Pratyahara is external or internal. But that is the beginning of withdrawing inside. So Pratyahara is that principle where it's a very beautiful principle. The example that they give is of a tortoise, right? A turtle, when it senses danger, it withdraws its limbs. So similarly, we suffer because we are so caught up with the world, right? And then when we suffer, then we realize that, okay, maybe we have to kind of withdraw a little bit. So this is that withdrawal principle, where instead of the mind constantly following the senses to the outer world, right? The eyes always want to see stuff, the ears always want to hear their favorite music, the tongue always wants to go to the favorite restaurant. So the senses are always outward bound, right? So that's a very beautiful in the Bhagavad Gita, that picture there of, Krishna holding the reins and, the horses just, the horses are depicted senses. Right? So the senses are always outward bound. But you have to rein it in and, you have to get that control to be able to draw the mind inward. And that is that Pratyahara principle, the withdrawal. And then that's followed. So dharana is the next principle of concentration. So without pratyahara, dharana can't happen. Like we cannot concentrate if we're constantly desiring outward, right? If the mind is concentrating for the next vacation or the next restaurant to eat in, where can concentration come? So you see there's so much of order also in this whole thing, where you have to be able to be disciplined, you have to be able to work with your mind, to withdraw the mind inward, and then you can connect to the next limb, which is dharana. And then from dharana, the next limb is dhyana, which is meditation. So we have to have these, so dharana is a little bit more of interrupted concentration, right? It's not continuous. You try to bring your awareness to your breath, the mind goes away. And again, you bring your awareness to the breath and the mind goes away. So that's a constant, trying. You're trying to get that, focus. But in dhyana, it is a continuous uninterrupted flow. And actually, they talk about it very deeply. The example they take is of pouring oil from one pot to another, right? So when you pour that oil, how the oil flows continuously. There's no breakage, there's no stoppage. So that is the difference between dhyana and dharana. So in dharana, it's constantly the mind is running away, bringing it back, the mind is running away, you're bringing it back. But in dhyana, it is constant, uninterrupted flow. And eventually, when we can, when that state arrives, then the next state of samadhi may be opens to us. So I don't want to talk about samadhi. So that is the point. So you can see there's a beautiful order to Ashtanga Yoga. Yeah. So yamas, niyamas, all are very important, because if we have no, there's no, we are not able to restrain ourselves, we're not able to discipline ourselves. It's very hard to concentrate, and it's very hard to, get into those states of what they call higher states of consciousness. So all of those limbs are so important, and they all build up into eventually dhyana and samadhi.
No, I think that beautifully explained some, fairly complex concepts to us. Thank you so much for doing that. And you mentioned the mind-body-breath connection as an essential one in yoga. So could you explain this also further?
Yeah, so this is my favorite pet topic. So I love to talk about this. Now, the only thing I want to say is this is not something in yoga. Yeah, this is actually the reality. Our mind, body, breath, and I would go on to add energy. All of this is connected. It's science. It's really there. If we just reflect a little bit on ourselves, if we run a bit, right, our breathing pattern changes. So you see that the body and the breath is connected. And then similarly, if you are contemplating on some beautiful, image or something like that, if you notice the state of your mind, the mind will be very calm. But similarly, you're angry, you're agitated, you're screaming at someone. If you notice your breath will be jerky, your breath will be agitated. So this mind, body, breath, energy connection is a reality. It is not something only yoga practitioners talk about. But what is fascinating is yoga practitioners talked about it many years ago, thousands of years ago. But today science is proving it. That is the difference. So it's actually quite interesting, and I really wanted to read out, a part where actually Deepak Chopra in his book like Super Genes, he's brought out how every single thing that we do, right, is so connected in the mind, what we think about his body. And all of this Swami Shivananda has said so many years ago as well. So actually yoga practitioners were the first scientists, I would say, and they actually knew so much that only today science is discovering. So mind, body and breath is deeply connected, which is a reality. And then today, neuroscientists, like I have a name, Dr. Candice Pert, she has even gone on to say that it's not even mind and body. It is actually mind-body. Because they have done so much of research. Like we tend to think of the mind as something that sits in our brain. But actually it is not that. The mind is all over the body. They have these receptors all over the body. So every single thing that we experience, which we think in the mind, is actually felt in the body. And if you think about it, it's true, right? You have some, something that you're really worried about, you feel it in your stomach, right? So the mind will, if there's some, if there's some terrible news that you hear, you want to collapse, right? And then if you sense a threat, your body will freeze. So the mind and the body is actually the same. We just don't realize it. So it is so connected. And in fact, this neuroscientist goes on to say it's not even mind and body, it's mind-body. And also that the body is actually the subconscious mind. So from all of this, why is it important to know this? Because we have to know that when we work with the body, it's not just the body, right? We are actually influencing the mind so strongly. So now science has come out with all of these words. Yeah, so there's this term called somatopsyche, yeah, which says you are working with the soma, which is the body, to create an effect on the mind. And they also say that most diseases or most illnesses are the opposite. It's psychosomatic because it starts in your mind. And today, this is all against science because 95% of all diseases now, they say, starts with stress. And where is the stress experience? The stress is experienced in the mind. And where is it manifest? It manifests in the body through diseases. Today, it is accepted that so many diseases, so many diseases, because stress affects your inflammatory system, right? So your immune system, all of that comes down. And it's so accepted that the mind, affects the state of the body. So we have to know that, so that's what they call this psychosomatic. And what yoga does is it's somatopsych, it's the opposite. So you work through your body, you open the body, right? You feel, you stretch and you sense, open states of body, and then you extend and then you release. So all the stress in the mind is actually sitting in our body. So when you consciously work with the body through deep stretching and all of that, it releases the tension that is, held in the body. So that is the mind-body breath connection. Like, it is all connected. And then, we work, pranayama practice works again, like how asana practice is body on the mind. Pranayama practice will be breath on the mind. Right? So when you work with pranayama, you really work on deepening your breath, you work on consciously doing your breath. So that again has a very beautiful and positive influence on the state of your mind.
When you mentioned pranayama, could you perhaps for our viewers, give us an example or a small demonstration of, what good breathing should be?
Sorry. Just there was a little bit of a disconnect, so I didn't hear your question.
Yeah. I was saying, since you mentioned pranayama and how it's essentially breathing for better health.
Yeah.
So could you, explain to our viewers how to do this, or give us a small demonstration of what is a good breathing technique that maybe we can all use to help us reduce stress?
Yeah, so the most important thing to understand is that breathing is it's like considered the bridge between the body and the mind. Yeah, and they say it is one of the biggest gifts that we have. Like most of the functions, like digestive function, all of that is automatic. We have very little control over it. But they say universe has actually given us a gift by giving us this opening on that breathing, by being able to regulate the breathing. And because of that, we actually have the ability to bring about a much more positive state of mind. So the thing, and breathing is especially important. They say one of the best gifts of yoga practice is stress relief. Yeah, so life causes us enough stress. So we don't have to go searching for stress. But then through our yoga practices, we learn how to consciously release stress. So the deep stretching, the deep breathing, the deep relaxation, and then, all of that has a very tremendous effect on our psyche. It changes the way we think, it shifts the state of our mind, shifts our perspective, and we're able to handle stress so much better. Now, especially with a deep breathing, so even in the, like I said, all this goes back to the Yoga Sutras. So Maharishi Patanjali has told us, Prachardana Vidharanabhyam Va Pranasya. So besides deep breathing, the best thing we can focus on is long exhalations. So they say long exhalations actually activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the relaxation response. So they say because of anger and all of that, we are all on what they call a sympathetic overdrive. Yeah, so we're constantly releasing this stress in our body. But by consciously engaging in deep, especially long exhalations, we are able to offset that by activating the parasympathetic nervous response. So I always tell people, right, to me the greatest thing about yoga practice is that it actually gives you technique. So this is no offense to doctors, but even if you go to a doctor, he will tell you you need to relax or you need to de-stress. But nobody tells you how to do that. But it's only yoga practice that gives you specific tools, right? How to consciously move, how to move with awareness, how to move with consciousness of breath, how to work your breath. So that is why this such an important practice that we all must do every single day, because nothing else gives you that experience. People will tell you relax. Now, how do you do that? But at the end of a yoga practice, I can assure you that you will feel relaxed. So that is what I think. The greatness of yoga practice, it is an experiential practice. Random words like inner peace, relaxation, all of that we actually experience, because otherwise they are just words. But through our yoga practice, through learning how to breathe, we actually can feel these states, we experience these states, and what they call the bliss of our inner essence. So everybody tells you, oh, joy is within. Where's the joy? Right? Because you have to know how to connect within to taste that joy. And the yoga practice gives you those tools to connect within. So, like I said, we go back to the technique. So, long exhalations, especially, are it's very important to relax. And some of the techniques that they give also is the Nadi Shodhana is a very beautiful technique because it helps us to balance, right? So we're talking about the sympathetic nervous system, and then we're trying to offset that. We're trying to bring balance into the nervous system by doing the, relaxation, by doing activating the parasympathetic. So this Nadi Shodhana practice, or the alternate nostril breathing as it is popularly known, is a very beautiful practice because it aims to bring balance. Yeah, so we have, our bodies have these opposites. Yeah, so we have what they call the left and right hemispheres of the brain, and even the energies that flow through our bodies in the subtle body. We have what they call the Ida Nadi and the Pingala Nadi. And one is related, the Ida Nadi is related to the moon, and the Pingala Nadi is related to the sun. Right? So you can imagine. So the Pingala Nadi related to the sun will be the heating, the Ida Nadi related to the moon will be cooling, right? So we have to try to bring balance between this Ida and Pingala Nadis as well, the energies that flow within us. So there are so many things that are so, opposite. And the aim of these practices are to bring balance between those opposites. Then we have the parasympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system. So we need to try and bring balance between that as well. So this Nadi Shodhana practice is a very beautiful practice, which I can try to explain here. So you just make a fist with your thumb, and then you release with your hand, sorry, and then you release your thumb and the last two fingers. Yeah, so this is called like a Nastara Mudra. So you can just hold this here. So this is just to help you, so that we're not spending all our times being awkward and changing hands and doing all that. So this just helps you to shift between nostrils very easily. And the beauty about this breathing practice, what I want you to remember, is that the length of the exhalation is twice that of the inhalation. Yeah, so that is a very beautiful thing to remember. It automatically connects us to that relaxation platform. Yeah, so from here you can just block the right nostril. We always just start with the exhalation, yeah, and then we start the inhalation. So we can just do a few rounds of this. So block your right nostril and just exhale through the left nostril. Yeah, and then you start inhaling through your left nostril. Yeah, so this is where it starts. Inhale 1, 2, 3, and now you block your left nostril, release the right nostril. Remember, exhalation is double. Yeah, so you'll exhale out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, as you inhale, it will be 1, 2, 3. Now block the right, release the left, exhale through the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale 1, 2, 3. Block the left, release the right, exhale through the right. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale right, 2, 3. Block the right, release the left, exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale 1, 2, 3. Block the left, release the right, exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale 1, 2, 3. Block the right, release the left, and exhale out completely through the left. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Yeah, so now don't quickly open your eyes, just keep your eyes closed, release your hands, and then just stay with your breath. Yeah, so the benefit of the practice is after the practice. So just staying here, continue to give your attention to your breath. Just following your breath as you inhale and exhale. And then you'll notice that with your attention, your breathing changes. And as you keep watching your breath will get really soft, really subtle, almost as if it's not even breathing. And then at that point, if you connect to your mind, you will notice that the mind is so settled as well. The mind is so calm, so steady, right? And then when that you can taste that resolved state of consciousness, or what they called a samahita chitta, then you can taste the bliss of your own inner essence. That is the whole direction of the yoga practice, to connect you to your own inner bliss. Okay, and slowly open your eyes. So I hope you enjoyed that.
Yes, it was beautiful. In fact, in that process of breathing out, you can feel the tension leaving your body.
Yeah.
You can feel the relaxation happening.
So even in the Hatha Yoga Prakriti, there's a very beautiful verse that I like a lot, which explains the relationship between the mind and the breath. So it's Vate chalam chittam, nishchale nishchalam. So wherever if your breath is unsteady, like your mind also is unsteady. But once your breath becomes steady, the mind also steady. So, the mind kind of follows the breath. So as you work with your breath, it's a very powerful tool to exert some influence on the mind. Yeah, because I always say the mind is most important. In fact, I always feel that the conversation about health should begin with the mind. Yeah, because it is so accepted now that most problems arise because of problems in the mind, our inability to deal with our own minds. The greatest challenge we face in our life is our own minds. Right? So in Vedanta, they say the mind on its own can make a hell out of heaven or a heaven out of hell. So the focus needs to be, all of us are very into, okay, eating the right food, okay, exercising, moving the body, right? But nobody talks about the mind. But that's really the most important conversation we should have, because the state of our mind affects everything else. And these practices help you to actually, positively influence the state of your mind. I always say we're not doomed by the minds that we have.
Thank you for that beautiful demonstration, which I'm sure has helped many of our viewers. And you've also discussed in your book the concept of dhyanam or meditation as another key tool to deal with anxiety. Yeah. And particularly in these very anxious times, I'm sure people would be keen to hear more about how to practice meditation or apply the concept of dhyanam in their daily life.
So if you see in the whole scope of the Ashtanga Yoga, Dhyanam is only the 7th limb. Yeah, it's not right in the beginning. So before that, like we talked about in Ashtanga Yoga, all those other factors are important. Yeah, self-awareness, self-study, right? And really being aware of what is it that we're doing, what is it that we're thinking. And that's where the asana, pranayama, we have to be able to settle the mind. We have to get those, steady states of the mind where the mind is not constantly, at war with itself. So only when we can have some measure of stability in our minds, they say meditation actually is not something that we do, but it is actually a state that we receive. Yeah, so concentration, focus, that is what we work on. So in Dharana practice, which is the step before meditation, we work on focusing on the breath, right? So count 15 breaths, count 30 breaths. Right? In that way, we are training the mind. So we have to understand that everything that we do leaves its imprint on the brain. Yeah, so there is constant neuroplasticity that is going on. So what our effort should be is to create these habitual patterns, because patterns are important. Yeah, so according to Dr. Bruce Lipton, he says 95% of the time we run on subconscious patterns. And these subconscious patterns have been installed in our systems before the age of 7, because they say till then our brains are actually in a very hypnotic stage. Their brain waves are very slow, and it's at what they call the theta level. So we are acting out of all of these patterns that have been installed in us before we even knew anything about life or what we wanted out of life. And which is why people feel stuck. They have all these good intentions, but nothing changes because we are not conscious. Yeah, so through these practices, through asana practice, you become aware of your feet, you become aware of your hip, you become aware of the right arm, your right leg, your left shoulder, the right shoulder, right? What is your breathing like? You become a more conscious human being. And eventually, consciousness that helps us to be present in the moment and move our minds in the direction. So he says one way to change is through constant repetition. Yeah, that's how we create a new habit, by doing it over and over again. So if we want to settle our minds, 1 minute is 15 breaths, and so like that, we say, okay, every day maybe we say do 75 breaths, or we say we do, 100 breaths, right? So by doing it repeatedly, we actually, I tell people, like here hiking is a big thing. So I say it's like going into this, like the forest which has no trail, right? So at that point, we are just trying to find our way. But as we keep walking the same path over and over again, we create these neural pathways in our brain. So that's what we're doing. We're creating these pathways by constant repetition. So if people want to go into meditation, all of that, that's great. But to understand, first you have to be able to concentrate. You've got to be able to hold attention. And then this attention is not only when we close our eyes and focus on our breath. This being present is that concept of mindfulness where we're present to life, right? So somebody's talking to you. I mean, I have to be present to what you're saying to be able to make this interview really interesting, right? Similarly, your child is talking to you. You have to be present to the child to be able to develop a good relationship with the child, right? Your work is in front of you. If you're constantly checking your phone and you're not present to your work, then that's going to suffer. So any aspect of our life will only improve through attention, and by constantly getting our mind, it's a philosophy, right, that we want to be present to life. So by constantly directing our mind to be present to whatever is the situation in front of us, then our minds get trained, right? So then we sit and close our eyes and focus on our breath, then it's a little bit more easier because we're used to that. So it's not like whole day we're completely unconscious and then okay, we're going to sit there in the evening, close our eyes and focus on our breath. Yeah, that it's just harder. You can do that, but it's harder. So we have to make this being present to life a very big part of the way we function. Because the beauty of life can be experienced only if all the time, people are in front of us and our minds are somewhere else, then, we are not present. When we wonder what happened, then we wonder why we are stuck. Because nothing changes, because we're not present to life, we're not making different choices. Right? So that being present to life, the Atha principle we call it, is such an important factor. In fact, that's the first word of the Yoga Sutras. In the very first verse of the Yoga Sutras, Maharishi Patanjali says, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. So it is a discipline. Yeah, it's not like a fun thing. It's not like a fad. It is a discipline to be present.
No, I think that's a very important point you mentioned, that it's a discipline. But for people who want to take up yoga just as a form of exercise, for example, and focus on the asanas and so forth, for its health benefits, which may be holistic in their benefits, being yoga day and so forth, what would you say to motivate someone to develop this discipline? And you've also talked in your book about the need for consistent practice. So what would you say to motivate someone to do?
I mean, I think all of us know the value of consistent practice, and it's not just about yoga. I always say any skill that we're trying to learn, right? We want to play the piano well, how many times, how many years our children learn the piano before they can create good music, right? So similarly, also when we think about learning any skill, right? You want to dance on the stage, how many years of practice goes before that? So any skill requires consistent practice. And I think we do it because we are motivated by the benefit, right? So when I first started my journey, I just felt so good at the end of my first yoga class. Like all the stress and tension that I was carrying around with me was completely released. And I felt so good that I told myself, I remember, it was so profound, I told myself I never wanted these feelings to end. Yeah, and that journey has continued from there. I went on to become, a regular student. Then I went on to be a teacher. Then I was so excited. Then I decided I want to share this knowledge with everybody, right? So I set up my own studio. So it is love. It is only love that gets you to be consistent. You have to love the way you feel, right? You should want to be in a better place. Yeah, you should want to not be living, afflicted in the mind, constantly agitated, constantly snapping at people, right? You have to know that there is a better way to live, and your yoga practice is your path to get there. And if that is important to you, then you don't need to be persuaded. The good feelings that you feel after yoga class will get you to open your mind. I always tell my students, right? You have to enjoy the practice. How good you feel when you stretch your body. Right? It is only love that brings you back to the mat.
You've told us a little bit about your journey as, a student and then as a practitioner. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about your personal journey with yoga?
Yeah, so it started off like that. I was, also my mind was agitated and, stressed out. And I don't know, I had this deep urging in my heart that there was a better way to be. That there was something, and coming from India, from Coimbatore, I naturally searched for yoga. It was something that was, I would say, my soul's calling. Even in college, I went for a meditation course. I was always searching. But asana practice did it for me, because I'm basically a very physical person, and I love the whole asana practice and the deep relaxation. And like I said, the good feelings I had at the end of the practice, I just fell in love with the practice. Like they say, it was like a light bulb was switched on. And, I was reading B.K. Iyengar, so many years later, and I saw that he had this very beautiful quote also, that yoga is like a light that is switched on in your life. And that, the more you practice, the brighter the flame. So I really think that in many ways describes my life. Like I fell in love with it because it made me feel so good, and it was a very organic path. I became a teacher, and then I came back here. Then I was just going around teaching, like freelance. Then I decided, I wanted to sink my roots down. So after my second child was born and he started school, I felt free, because I knew it was a big commitment. Though I lived in Malaysia, I came back to India very often. My parents were in India. So, I had to close the place for 3 months. I don't know how I could juggle all that. But at some point, I just decided to do it. So I started, my studio, it went on. And then I've always been a writer. So from, before I started yoga, even I was writing. So I wanted to express how wonderful this whole practice was. And that's how I wrote my first book, which Niyogi Books very kindly published, and which I'm so happy with. Yeah. So it's a very organic journey. So actually it's gone on and taken shape. Like after the book, I became a speaker. I had so many opportunities to speak. I was speaking at educational institutions. I was speaking at, Rotary functions, entrepreneurs organization. So that was again great. Like it just expanded into another dimension. And then during the lockdown, ever since the pandemic, again, the online world has just opened up. And I actually am a TV host now. I host a TV, again, series called Yoga Shakti, which is based in the UK and by Anand TV. So many different dimensions of my life are just opening up through the yoga, and it's just a very natural, organic process, and I'm just enjoying every step of the way. But truly, I love the practice. It has helped my own life so much. I'm so passionate about it. I truly believe that everybody should do the yoga practice, which is why I do what I do.
Wonderful. I think your passion is truly contagious in a good way. So I hope more people are inspired by it. And you mentioned that you were a writer even before you started practicing yoga and so forth. So now that we have Yoga Shakti, the book, are there more books that you plan to write about yoga, or maybe even other topics?
No, I think yoga consumes my life. So yes, I've actually written a book on meditation as well, because, well, it all comes because of so many, I have students who are constantly asking me things. And also you see what is going on in the yoga world, and then sometimes you just want to set some things, just share some information, So again, meditation is such a loosely used word. Everybody talks about meditation, but nobody really knows, right? Because we just think that simply closing our eyes. So I love the, whole Ashtanga Yoga concept that was laid out in Maharishi Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So I've actually written a book based on the Ashtanga Yoga, meditation, or describing all the different limbs, how all of those limbs are so important in order to come together eventually as a meditative practice. The importance of all the other limbs as well. So I'm just working on editing it, and hopefully I will be able to send it in, by the end of the year. And so that is something that's already done. And I have many other books in my head. I want to talk about asana because, again, asana is very maligned. People just think of it as stretching, as some form of exercise. But there's so much of benefit, like, this whole mind-body connection, how actually through the asana. So my teacher here, Manoj Kaimal, he puts it very beautifully. He says, we begin with a shape, right? Shape of a body. But eventually that shape of the body leads us to a state of mind. And that is the whole point of asana. So it is about states of mind. So when we say go into balancing posture, say, like, we have Rikshasana, the tree pose, we have Natarajana, standing on one leg, the dancing pose. So when we think about all of that, it's not just about somehow finding a balance and staying there, but it is about experiencing that state of balance in our head. So to understand that all of this is to eventually feel these states in our heads. So to beautiful connection between the body, so that it's not just seen as, the very first question, right? It's not just seen as a physical practice, but see how it influences the state of our minds, how we can use it to our benefit. So that's another thing that I would like to write at some point.
Wonderful. We look forward to seeing more books from you.
Yeah.
And just as a concluding sort of thought for our viewers, the world has gone through a traumatic time with so much anxiety and stress over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So what would you advise people to do in order to deal with the anxieties and stresses of this time?
Take up the yoga practice. To me, that is the best thing we can do for ourselves. I'll just give you a very personal example, right? So because of International Yoga Day going on, so many things are going on. I had a couple of events yesterday, and by the time I finished with that at 8:30 at night, I was so completely exhausted. And I woke up this morning, my body aching, my mood not feeling so great. And then I just came down and I opened my mat and I started stretching. I started doing my asana practice. And at the end of it doesn't take you so long, even half an hour, I just felt so good. All of that pain in my body and that stiffness, all of that was eased. My mood was lifted, my energy was lifted. And I was just thinking, I am so grateful I have this practice. More than anybody else, though I want the whole world to do it, I do it for myself, to lift myself into a better state. And I truly believe, it's a form of self-love, it's a form of self-care. And we want to present the best version of ourselves to everybody, including the family around us, to our children, to our spouses, to the people we work with. And the yoga practice allows us to present that best version of ourselves. Otherwise, we're just cranky, we're just irritated, we're snapping at the kids, right? We're short-tempered with the spouse. That's not our best. That's just those waves, right? We have to settle those waves. And our asana practice, our pranayama practice, all of that helps us to settle those waves. So to me, experience life, not just agitated and irritated and just somehow frustrated, going through it, to experience life in its beauty, right? To get that essence of life, how yoga practice is so important. Like how people wake up, you have a bath to cleanse the dirt. Similarly, every day pressures of life build up. And we need to have some tool to ease it, to release it.
Yeah.
And that's the yoga practice. So that magic, it's the magic on the mat, I call it. So, it just you love yourself, you care about how you feel, then you just go get on the mat half an hour. We can spare that, right? So I've written this in my, my meditation book, and it's quite funny because constantly I hear from people, I don't have time. But that's not true at all, because I researched and I did some study, and they said every, a person looks at their Instagram like so many thousand times, a day, checks their Facebook. We have time. It is really about prioritizing yourself. So, to me, it's like you love yourself, you want to be in a calm, settled, grounded state, and you will just do it. That's it. Do the yoga.
Yes, I think on that very positive and motivational note, we can wind up our conversation for today.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for sparing the time to speak to our viewers today. It's been a very enlightening and inspiring conversation. I'm sure many people will be inspired to take up the yoga practice, and the easy way to do it, of course, is by using the techniques given in the book Yoga Shakti.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not because it's my book, but really, I mean, it's all the learning that I have, like, this has been a very personal journey for me. I went into it, to help myself. And everything in that book is stuff that I practiced myself, right? It is not something that I'm just reading some techniques from somewhere and putting it in. All of these things, whether it is having a journal, writing a journal, so
So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and for inspiring our viewers with your words today. So we urge everyone to take up the practice of yoga and be the best that they can be going forward.
absolutely.
So thank you so much, Shailaja.
Thank you so much, Priyamada. Such a pleasure. And Yogi Books is very close to my heart.
Wonderful. So we look forward to more books from you and to continuing our association with you. Thank you.
Thank you.